Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Muhi Khwaja with the Muslim Philanthropy Podcast at American Muslim Community Foundation. Today we have on our guest, Bassema Yousef. She's been nominated as a volunteer fundraiser. Congratulations and welcome to the show, Bassema.
Thank you.
So let everybody know where you're located and a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I currently live in New York City, a block over from Trump Tower. I am an Arab Muslim American. I was born and raised between Boston, Western Massachusetts, and Westchester County, New York. I went to school in Massachusetts, worked in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, and am in management consulting.
Great. And for this nomination, you're recognized for helping so many different nonprofit organizations. And before we get into the specifics of those nonprofits, I kind of just want to get a sense of not everybody does what you do. And you're very passionate about certain causes and you help share that with your network. So that's totally appreciated and awesome that you're such a rock star in that vein. And what is it about, was it your family upbringing, some values that you share closely and things that you want to do to make sure others have the support they need? So just share a little bit more about why you're so passionate about helping different causes.
I am a daughter of two refugees and displaced persons and immigrants to the United States. I come from, a very strong faith-based family. My father and mother were incredibly, insistent on us understanding Islam and understanding the values and the kind of the moral grounding that we have within Islam to help others, especially if you've been able to overcome a number of obstacles and difficulties yourself. So, having spent a lot of time traveling back to Palestine, to Lebanon, to Jordan, and spending a lot of time in the refugee camps, I knew the obstacles and how hard it was for my father and my mother to both overcome those immense challenges. And I, firsthand witnessed and having, deep grounded belief and a moral, grounding in Islam and knowing, zakat is incredibly important, helping
Mm-hmm.
those, that are downtrodden, et cetera, those that aren't in a position of privilege, such as yourself, is critical. And I think kind of the volunteerism started really, really young when my father was one of the first few Muslim men in the state of Massachusetts to really push and fundraise across the entire state of Massachusetts, going into Connecticut to build the first masjid and open space for Muslims in the New England area. Our masjid was beautiful. It had an Islamic school. It was one of the most diverse masjids I still to this day have ever been to. It was, it wasn't just predominantly, one specific, culture or
Mm-hmm.
nationality. We were Malaysian, we were Pakistani, we were Palestinian, we were Indian, we were Black Americans, we were Sunni, we were Shia, and
Right.
it was beautiful, and we did a lot of work and volunteerism from the beginning in this masjid. So having my father as a role model, it was so important to him to do that, and then also knowing that every single year that we fasted during Ramadan, we gave back to the refugees in the states, the countries, excuse me, that my parents came from. So I knew that every year my parents were collecting and saving very little, what little they actually had to, and through the masjid to actually send back to the refugees who had even less. So that was instilled at a really, really young age.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, it's really comes down to developing that kind of moral standing and grounding through Islam that is so important to help other people. More recently too, my focus not only on refugees because I've a history of both my parents being refugees. I technically have on one end refugee status as my mother was displaced and she's still displaced refugee from the Palestinian territories. Um, cancer because I'm a cancer survivor as of a year and change. And
Yeah.
understanding too that not only can you be a refugee or displaced, but understanding too that you can not have access as a result of those hardships that are outside of your control to cancer treatment. And I've been like very active on that end, because I know for a fact that I've been incredibly blessed to have health insurance
Hmm.
country and access to kind of medical care. So those things have been like really important to me.
No, that's really inspiring, and kind of seeing you carry on that legacy of your parents and the work that they've been doing is really important to see. And I'm sure as the years go on, you're going to continue to do so much more as well. I want to highlight a few projects that were kind of brought to our attention, and everything from, even more than a decade ago to currently. There was working with Professor Khalid Beydoun on the Seoul District, where you were working to help local DC nonprofits. So tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've done in DC and then now in New York as well.
I've honestly been actively like volunteering to fundraise for different organizations since I was in high school. I, became the head of like the National Honor Society, which is like rooted in volunteerism and raising awareness and funds for charities. And I took that through college and started actively supporting, groups like ANERA, Palestinian Children's Relief, uh,
Mm-hmm.
UNRWA, USA, and then understanding too a concept in Islam that's really important that I can look to just my immediate surroundings. And yes, my background and my passion for, helping refugees and asylees and displaced persons is one that's very, familial to me. But in Islam, the Prophet, peace be upon him, like it's rooted in our religion that we must help people in our community and know
Right.
that in our community, and we have to be active neighbors, and it's incredibly important. So, fast forward, still working with all these groups through grad school, and then getting to DC and working with the working as a consultant with the United States government. Linked up with an amazing community in Washington D.C. I mean, Khaled Beydoun and I, we still like recently still talk about it. It was like the best of times. It was like the Obama era. We were, we were coming in
Yeah.
literally President Obama. So I couldn't have timed it better if I tried. I like got to DC to work in management consulting
Hmm.
when Obama got elected and then took office that January. And Khaled was there in this like very, very vibrant Muslim American community across the board, also existed there. And we wanted to do more for the local community and the local charities and started, you know, kind of like an off the cuff group. We met, weekly. We started raising and, hosting events to kind of raise money and awareness for nonprofits that were supporting local charities and local communities, which also included working with the Whitman Walker Health Group that focuses on AIDS, patients and access to HIV medication in
Hmm.
Washington D.C. And in D.C. it has one of the highest rates in the country, if not the world. So it started off in D.C. and I came back to New York and working, with local communities and these organizations that I've been working with closely for a number of years. Like, I ramped it up because I just thought that refugees weren't going anywhere. And as a result, unfortunately, of the Syrian crisis, it just started getting to be like larger and larger and more prevalent. So really threw myself into those efforts, especially around Ramadan. And as a reminder to, the Muslim Ummah and people around us that zakat is so important and understanding like those, again, who aren't as fortunate as you and our duty to help others is so important. So focusing on like that time to really fundraise and raise awareness for these communities.
Right. And you talked a little bit about your story and life experience with cancer and being a survivor. And I recently saw that you were also doing some events in the Muslim community to help, and in the Arab community as well, to help with early detection. And so tell us a little bit more about, like, how that's been
Yeah, of
life
course.
changing and important for you.
I was, unfortunately diagnosed with breast cancer after being, an advocate myself, advocating for my own health. I'd been misdiagnosed by a doctor, and then 9 weeks later, it would come back really hard to bite me for not kind of pushing forward with, getting the kind of critical care that I needed at the time and not listening to my body. And so that really, really changed the course of treatment. And my lifestyle, moving forward, sadly. But again, being deeply, deeply rooted in my beliefs in Islam and understanding God's mercy, I really, really am lucky that I have access to healthcare and I have a supportive family around me, and the ability to get that access. And the more I was suffering, I kept thinking there's so many more people, if not almost everybody, who is not in a privileged position that I'm in to get the care and access that I need. And I know that, for a group like Palestinian Children's Relief, I couldn't think of a, having a year out of cancer, going through tremendously like horrific, surgeries and life altering, surgeries and decisions, what it was like for, these children in Gaza and in the occupied territories to be suffering through cancer and having absolutely no access.
Right.
And I know for a fact that Palestinian Children's Relief and Steve Sotheby, he's one of the most amazing, selfless human beings on the planet. His previous wife, Allah Yarhamha, passed away from cancer. And he has literally helped fundraise and stand up the only pediatric cancer center in all of Gaza and the
Wow.
first in Bethlehem. And I couldn't imagine wanting to help any other particular group of people more than helping children who have no access to healthcare or cancer or life, extending treatment than something like this project. And, I was a year out and I just wanted to help. I wanted to do something. And alhamdulillah, like through the networks of people that I know and other people, friends know, we were able to raise, a sizable amount of money for these children. But, they're still in tremendous need and there's still so much work to be done.
Yeah, I think it's really inspiring just to kind of see your commitment to helping other people. And I think sharing your story and being able to have empathy for so many other people as well is really inspiring. What other things are there that kind of motivate you to be actively engaged in the community as well?
In the Muslim American community.
Or in general, like I know that you've done stuff with like the Brooklyn, is it the School of Music or Academy of Music? So,
Oh,
even, yeah.
right. Um, yes, I worked with the Brooklyn Academy of Music on the first ever Muslim festival in all of New York City in the five boroughs.
Hmm.
I've taken part in, different platforms to like help elevate Muslim women's voices and stories within our communities across the country, because we really need to own our own stories and we need to like kind of revisit and revitalize the idea that women should have a voice in their own stories in the Muslim
Definitely.
community,
Yeah.
not only in the American community, but within our own communities. And that's been, critical for me, trying to work with like women to empower them to tell their stories. Like we have our own stories and we can't allow other people to tell them. And so I've always been deeply, deeply rooted in the idea of, bringing awareness and like elevating Muslim Americans across the country, because we've always kind of been a hidden, minority. We want to be able to tell stories. I grew up, during the Bush, the Gulf War, and was like targeted in school during the Gulf Wars. I was
Right.
targeted heavily and also like violently after September 11th. Our family members, these aren't like, these I can go on and on.
Yeah.
After the Muslim ban recently during Trump's, recent Muslim ban, my nephew was literally picked on and targeted violently in his school in a community that I thought was, more rooted in diversity than I had, maybe thought otherwise. And I knew then, and I always knew, and I know more than ever, that we need a platform. We need to elevate our voices and we need to be supportive of one another. And that goes across the spectrum. And another thing that's like been really important, for instance, too, I worked with Asif Mandvi with Comedy Central on pulling together kind of like a comedic, approach to, this misinformation about Muslim Americans. Because,
Hmm.
it's also our duty to be relatable.
Right.
It's so important for us again to tell our stories and be relatable. So we're not that, other that we keep getting mischaracterized as, and, scare tactics and like different administrations have used. So that has been really, really important to me. So I've done as much as I, can and could throughout the years doing that.
I think, this paints a really good picture of why you are nominated. And again, just congratulations on being highlighted. And we're looking forward to hosting you and your family and friends at our annual symposium on November 14th. So, congratulations on the nomination again.
Appreciate it.
Of course. Do you have any other questions or anything that you'd like to share?
No, I'm just, like truly humbled, and I really appreciate the recognition. I didn't expect the recognition. I don't want the recognition. I'm really honestly just happy to do the work. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about, and I will always be passionate about. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.